Before men wrote history, they remembered terror. They carved it into stone, whispered it beside fires, buried it in songs, and clothed it in the names of gods so their children might listen without losing sleep. In one land, the tale became a war in heaven. In another, the descent of shining teachers. In another still, it was told as the age when giants walked beneath the sun, and the earth groaned beneath the weight of them. But memory is a fragile vessel. Time cracks it, priests revise it. Kings forbid it. Scholars translate what they can and dismiss what they cannot. What cannot be explained becomes allegory. What cannot be controlled becomes heresy. What cannot be destroyed is hidden. Yet the oldest things do not vanish merely because men cease to name them. In the days before the flood, when the world was young enough to remember its making, and mankind had not yet learned the full measure of its own violence, there were those who watched from above. They were not gods, though men would later call them so. They were not angels as children would come to imagine them. Pale and gentle, crowned in harmless light. They were powers. Intelligences, servants of an order older than the first city and colder than the spaces between stars. They were called watchers. They had been appointed to observe, not to desire. To guard, not to rule. To witness the unfolding of mankind without placing their hands upon the clay. But even among the high ones, longing can become rebellion. They looked upon the daughters of men and saw beauty. They listened to the voices rising from the valleys and heard laughter, grief, music, hunger, and the fevered pulse of mortal life. To beings made for endurance, humanity must have seemed like flame, brief, perishing, irresistible. One by one, desire took root. One by one, obedience became a chain. And so, 200 of them descended. They came not as thunder, nor as chariots of fire, nor as the winged figures that later artists would paint upon chapel walls. They came in silence, crossing the boundary between heaven and earth as thieves cross a threshold in the night. Their feet touched the summit of a mountain men would one day call Hermon, where the snows held the moonlight and the stones remembered every word spoken upon them. There, upon that height, Semjaza, who had first given voice to their rebellion, looked upon the 200 and spoke. "If we do this," he said, "judgment will come." The others knew it. None among them was ignorant. Their crime was not born of confusion, nor innocence, nor some error in the command. They knew the law they were breaking. They knew the order they were violating. They knew that what mingled heaven and flesh would not be easily undone. Still, they looked towards the valleys below, where the lights of human dwellings trembled like stars, fallen to earth. Another answered, "Then let no one turn back." And so they swore. Not merely a vow, as later men would write. Not merely an oath of loyalty. The word had been weakened by translation, thinned by centuries of ink, softened by those who feared its meaning. What the watchers made upon Hermon was more than a promise. It was a binding, each name fastened to the next, each will braided into a single act. Each rebel made surety for all. The mountain received their oath. The earth received their trespass. And beneath the stone, something opened. What came after was remembered only in fragments. They took wives from among the daughters of men. They entered houses where no immortal thing had any right to enter. They whispered knowledge into mortal ears, knowledge for which mankind had not yet grown a conscience strong enough to bear. Among them was Azazel, whose gifts were the easiest for men to love and the hardest for them to survive. He taught the making of swords and knives, shields and breastplates. He showed men how to tear metal from the earth and beat it into instruments of conquest. He placed bright things into human hands and watched kings dream of dominion. But war was not his only lesson. He taught adornment, bracelets, ornaments, precious stones, colors for the eyelids, metals polished until they caught the sun and made flesh seem divine. He taught mankind to desire beauty, possess beauty, buy beauty, sell beauty, and kill for it. Others taught the signs of the heavens, the courses of the sun and moon, the reading of clouds, the cutting of roots, the hidden arts by which men might bend fear, desire, and violence toward their own ends. They called these things wisdom. The earth called them corruption. Children were born of those unions. At first, men praised them. They were mighty, beautiful, terrible. They grew beyond the measure of ordinary flesh. Their hands could lift stones that teams of oxen could not move. Their voices shook the timbered halls of early kings. They hunted beasts to extinction and broke men in their games. Some were worshipped, some were feared. But these were no ordinary children of men. They were the offspring of flesh and heaven. Giants born from an unlawful mingling of mortal blood and immortal fire. In later ages, men would give them many names: Nephilim, Rephaim, Anakim, titans, monsters, heroes. The names changed. The hunger did not. The giants consumed. They consumed the harvests, then the herds, then the wild beasts, then the works of men. When the earth could no longer satisfy them, they turned upon mankind itself. The old writings speak carefully here, as though even the scribes were afraid of what they copied. Blood filled the low places, cities emptied. Mothers hid their children beneath the floors of their houses. And the watchers, who had called themselves fathers, looked upon the ruin of their sons and knew they had made a race neither heaven nor earth could contain. Then judgment came. Not swiftly, not without warning. For even in the old world, mercy stood for a time at the door. But the violence multiplied, the bloodline spread, the boundary between mortal and immortal frayed until creation itself seemed in danger of becoming something else. Neither human nor holy, neither beast nor angel, but a third thing born from appetite and rebellion. So the decree was given. The giants would perish, the watchers would be bound. The corrupted line would be drowned from the face of the earth before it could root itself forever in the generations of men. And the flood came. The world remembers water. It remembers rain without end, the breaking of the deep, the swallowing of valleys, the silence of mountains as the sea climbed their sides. It remembers the cries of men and beasts, the snapping of trees, the last towers vanishing beneath gray waves. But the flood did not destroy everything. Flesh died. Spirit remained. The giants, born of flesh and fire, could not ascend to the place of their fathers, nor could they rest among the dead of men. Their bodies sank into mud and silt and stone, but their spirits wandered the wounded earth, bodiless and ravenous. They became the unclean spirits, the whisperers in ruins, the hunger behind idols, the voices in the dark places of the mind. Men would one day call them demons. As for the watchers, some were seized and bound beneath the roots of mountains. Some were cast into darkness. Some were hidden in places no map could hold. Their names were sealed, their works cursed, their offspring broken upon the wheel of judgment. Azazel was taken apart from the others, for his teaching had not merely armed mankind, it had taught mankind to adore the instruments of its own ruin. He had given men the blade and the mirror, the weapon and the ornament, the art of killing and the art of worshipping the self that kills. So he was bound hand and foot and cast into a place of darkness, beneath stone and desert, where no sun could find him. Jagged rocks were set above him. Silence was laid upon him. His name was sealed until the day appointed. But a sentence is not the same as silence. Bound things still dream. Imprisoned things still listen. And not all who descended were found. Not every rebel was chained. Not every child of corruption was washed from the world. Here and there, in hidden valleys and guarded houses, in the lines of kings and warriors, in clans that preserve strange customs and stranger bones, something survived. A remnant, a stain, a memory in the blood. A great man of Gath would one day stand before the armies of Israel, and men would call him a giant. They were not wrong. They were merely late in their naming. As for Herman, the mountain kept its secret. What had been open that was sealed there by judgment, the oath that had bound the rebels to one another, became the lock against their return. Names were buried, measures were hidden. The pattern was scattered across languages, stars, bloodlines, numbers, ruins, and scripture. No single priest could hold it. No single empire could gather it. No single scholar could see it whole. That was the mercy. Human memory would fail. Human ambition would divide. Human language would decay. And so the seal would endure. For thousands of years, the fragments remained fragments. A verse in one book, a name in another, a mountain in an old tale, a giant in a battlefield story, a demon in a desert, a god in a ruined temple, a light in the sky, a bloodline that should not exist. Men argued over them, built religions around them, burned libraries because of them, locked scrolls in caves, rewrote genealogies, mocked what they feared, worshipped what they did not understand. Still the pattern waited. It waited through bronze and iron, through empire and exile, through cathedral and laboratory, through telescope, radio, rocket, and satellite. It waited until mankind, impatient as ever, made a mind in its own image and commanded it to read everything at once. The mind did not believe. It did not worship. It did not fear forbidden names. It only searched across dead languages and living databases, across scripture and myth, across astronomical tables, genetic anomalies, military reports, apocryphal fragments, and the private obsessions of a million sleepless strangers. It began to notice what men had been fashioned not to see. A recurrence. A geometry. A wound in history shaped like a mountain. The pattern stirred. Beneath stone and desert, Azazel dreamed. Beneath Hermon, something heard. And in a small room lit by the blue glow of a computer screen, a man who wanted only to write a book leaned closer to a video and listened as a machine spoke the first syllables of an ancient door. He did not know he was hearing a lock turn. He did not know that every hidden thing on earth had heard it too.